I have been assigned the privilege, and I do think it's a privilege, of introducing our speaker this morning, the Honorable Judge Steve Leifman. Judge Leifman is an Associate Administrative Judge of the Miami-Dade County Court. He previously served as Special Advisor on Criminal Justice and Mental Health for the Supreme Court of Florida and currently chairs the Florida Supreme Court Steering Committee on Problem-Solving Courts. Judge Leifman is the co-chair of the American Bar Association, Criminal Justice Mental Health Committee, and co-chair of the Judges and Psychiatrists Leadership Initiative. He serves on the Florida Drug Policy Advisory Council and the National Institute on Drug Addiction, Justice Community Opioid Innovation Network. Now, usually when you get up here and you introduce these, or your speakers, I get these bios that are like 2 pages. When I got Judge Leifman's, it was extremely short, so I did a little research on it. And some of the things I'd like to add, and I find so impressive. 2012, Judge Leifman received the Brain and Behavior Research Foundation's Productive Life Awards. In 2015, he became the first Floridian judge to receive the William H. Rehnquist Award for Judicial Excellence from Chief Justice of the United States, John Roberts. In 2019, he was the Yale NAMI Mental Health Advocacy Award winner, and in 2019, Presidential Commendation by the American Psychiatric Association. In between that, he does his day job as an actual judge, and we appreciate that. And I will sum it up as this. I was talking to one of our judges earlier, Judge Kevin Mullins, and when I told him who I was introducing this morning, I thought he summed it up so eloquently when he said, "You get the pleasure of introducing the judge that started this." And we look forward to having you, and I want you to join me in welcoming Judge Leifman.
Good morning. It is just inspiring to be here with all of you today. I've been speaking so much the last few weeks, I'm a little hoarse. But it is inspiring to see what's going on around this country. In Kentucky, you are one of the leaders now on changing how this nation addresses these issues. So congratulations and thank you. And thank you for that incredibly thoughtful introduction. My mom would be very proud. And I really would like to particularly thank your Chief Justice, your Associate Chief Justice, your former Chief Justice, for the amazing, amazing commitment to these issues. Former Chief Justice Minton, you may not be aware, but he actually helped get this started on a national level in his role as the chair of the State Justice Institute in 2018. And it was the first time national money got put into a national initiative of the courts to do this, and we all owe him an incredible gratitude for what he's done. So thank you, Chief. And I would be remiss not to thank your court administrator, Lori Givens, for all of her amazing work here in Kentucky and her commitment to help move this forward. And Carlton, thank you so much for your very inspiring words. It's an honor and really a privilege to be a judge. And I think we get to play such a unique role in our society. And it's a quiet role for a good reason. And we should be quiet because we don't want to be out there sticking our heads in places they shouldn't be. But this is one area that we just had to get ahead of. Because what I've realized after several years on the bench is that in many ways the criminal justice system is the repository of many failed public policies. And there really is no greater failed public policy than our treatment towards people with mental illnesses. The fact that we have applied a criminal justice model to an illness explains why we have failed so miserably. Had we just applied a disease or a population health model to this issue, we probably wouldn't be here today. So my journey into the mental health world actually began one morning when I was getting ready to go on the bench 23 years ago. At the time in Florida, judges had absolutely no training on how to identify people with mental illnesses, what to do with people with mental illnesses. My training went something like this the day I walked into my division, and it was from the judge whose division I took over. She said, "Steve, if they act strange or bizarre, order a psychological evaluation." That was it. It was pejorative, it was rude, but that's how we were trained. And so this particular morning, I was getting ready to start my day. I was approached by the assistant public defender and the assistant state attorney. They came to my chambers and said, "Judge, there's this amazing case. The defendant's parents are here, and we would really appreciate it if you would speak to this couple." At the time, I was handling a misdemeanor jail division. And so in a misdemeanor jail division, there are three kinds of defendants. There are those with attached serious felonies who are not allowed out of custody. There are those that are too poor and cannot afford to get out of custody, but mostly it's people with mental illnesses that just don't know how to get out of custody. So this lovely couple came into my chambers. They were very sophisticated. They appeared to be very well off, and they were very distraught. The mom was crying, the dad was shaking, and they literally began to beg me to get their son help. They told me that he was brilliant, he had gone to Harvard, he had a late onset of schizophrenia, he was now homeless, and he was recycling through the criminal justice system, and they just didn't know what to do. And when you're a new judge, you think you have a lot more power and a lot more wisdom than you really do. And I made one of those rookie mistakes, and I promised them that I would get their son help because I deal in logic. And I knew that if you got arrested and had a heart attack, we wouldn't just let you lie on the floor in a jail cell and die. And I assumed if you got arrested and you had a psychotic episode, we wouldn't let you lay on a floor and die. That we would, of course, get you immediately crisis care and take care of you. Boy, did I turn out to be wrong. And so as I started to go back into the courtroom after I promised this couple I would get their son help, the mom stopped me and she said, "Judge, there's one more thing I need to tell you about my son." She said, "Not only is he brilliant, but respectfully, he probably knows more about the mental health system than you do." And I looked at her, I was confused. She thought, I guess, that the lawyers had told me more about the situation than they had. And I said, "Excuse me?" And she said, "Oh, you see, my son, he's the former head of psychiatry at Jackson Memorial Hospital." She said he didn't show up to work one day, and we had no idea what happened to him. And it turned out he was having religious ideations. And so he cashed in his life insurance policy, and he got on an airplane, and he flew to Israel to be closer to God. And within 3 weeks, the Israelis deported him back to Miami because he was running around naked in the Orthodox sections of Jerusalem. And since then, he has been homeless and cycling in and out of the court system. And we just don't know what to do, Judge. So I'm like, no problem. I'm the judge. I could handle anything. I've got all this power. So I went into the court. I was still pretty stunned. I called his case, and we started to have an amazing conversation. He was coherent. He was thoughtful. Frankly, he was more respectful than the lawyers. And I'm thinking, maybe there's something wrong with the folks. He seems fine to me. Except when you looked at him, he looked like a homeless man who hadn't bathed in months. Now, mind you, he was on some really serious local county ordinance like possession of a dairy cart, which a lot of homeless a lot of homeless people with mental illnesses often get arrested on, which I later learned the police thought the same thing that I did. It wasn't nefarious or that they were being bad. They thought if they got him arrested, he'd get treatment. And so he kept insisting there was absolutely nothing wrong with him, and if I would only release him, he'd go get evaluated. I would see there was nothing wrong with him, and we would all move on, because in his own words, he said it was absolutely ridiculous that he was in jail on such a ridiculous charge because we had really dangerous people in Miami that needed to be in that cell, which was really hard to argue with him. So I said to him, "Can I ask you a question?" He said, "Sure, Your Honor, anything." I said, "I just don't understand one thing. You keep insisting there's absolutely nothing wrong with you, that you don't have any type of mental health disorder. But if that's the case, why would a Harvard-educated psychiatrist be homeless, be in the criminal justice system, and cycling in and out every single day?" And all of a sudden, he got a look on his face that I will not forget to the day I die. It was a look of complete fear and terror. And all of a sudden, he started rocking back and forth, and he started cupping his ears, and he went into a full-blown psychotic episode, and he started screaming at the top of his lungs, and he started to point to the back of the courtroom where his parents were seated, and he started screaming in sixes, and he started screaming, "Your Honor, Your Honor, Your Honor, you have to have the cup removed, you have to have the cup removed, you have to have that cup removed." And I said to him, "Aren't those your parents?" "No, no, no, no. Real parents, real parents, real parents. Died. Holocaust, Holocaust, Holocaust." And they're from the CIA, and they came to kill me, kill me, kill me, kill me, kill me, kill me. And the only brilliant thing that I knew to do was to order a psychological evaluation, which I immediately did. I don't know, 3-4 weeks went by. He's now in jail. 4 or 5 weeks on possession of a dairy cart. The evaluation comes back, and it says that not only was he incompetent to stand trial, he even met Florida's ridiculously high standard for civil commitment because he was imminently dangerous to self or others. I'm like, this is great. At the time in Florida, I needed 3 evaluations to get the lawyers to agree or stipulate that he was incompetent. I ordered 2 more. He's now in jail 10, 12 weeks on possession of a dairy cart. All 3 evaluations are back. They all say the exact same thing. Incompetent to stand trial and in desperate need of treatment because he is imminently dangerous to self or others. I immediately hand the evaluations to the lawyers. They immediately stipulate that he is incompetent to stand trial. And I'm like, this is great. I'm going to be a hero. I'm going to get this guy treated. The parents are going to be so happy with me. And I begin to order him into some kind of treatment. I'm really not sure because I haven't had any training on this. And I look down, and I notice a grin on the face of the assistant public defender. I will tell you, as a former assistant public defender, this is a really bad sign. And then she utters those words that can really set a judge off. She says to me, "Your Honor, in all due respect," because you know, when that's said to a judge, it has nothing to do with respect. That's how they call us idiots without going to jail. And I'm like, "Excuse me?" And I had just come over from the civil division, so I wasn't even up on all my criminal case law yet. And she whips out this Florida Supreme Court opinion that had come out not too much earlier. And what did it say? It said, "County court judges, of which I am, had absolutely no legal authority to civilly commit anybody or have them forensically committed. And that my only option was to do exactly what he had told me I needed to do 12 weeks earlier, which his parents had warned me he knew more about the system than I did, was to release him, have him go see a psychiatrist and get evaluated and come back." And there was a footnote in the Florida Supreme Court opinion case. It said, "We hate this opinion, and we strongly urge the Florida legislature to address this issue." Now, that case came out in 1999. How many people here think the Florida legislature has addressed that opinion? So it's brilliant to put this commission together, so thank you, because all of us need to work together to figure out these major gaps in the system so that we stop this ridiculous cycling of people who are just sick that need to be treated. And even though I hated the law, I am sworn to uphold it. And I had to release a floridly psychotic man who was eminently dangerous to self or others back to the streets of Miami. Not only did I not fulfill the promise I made his parents, I put him at risk, I put my community at risk, I probably put my job at risk if, God forbid, something terrible happened to him or he went and did something terrible to someone else. But I followed the law. This case was a window to everything that was wrong with both our criminal justice system and our community mental health system. And it made me realize that as judges, we were horribly and terribly prepared to handle cases of people with serious mental illnesses. We didn't know how to identify people, we didn't know how to talk to people, and we certainly didn't know what to do with their cases. And in retrospect, it turned out that I caused him to have that psychotic episode. Why? Not that I was mean or rude, but I realized later he never told me that he was a Harvard-educated psychiatrist. And when he came into that courtroom, the only person he thought he could trust was the judge. And I violated his trust by asking him that question because in his brilliant mind, I must have been part of that CIA conspiracy because how else would I have known that he was a Harvard-educated psychiatrist? Shame on me and shame on us for not knowing better. So when I became a judge, I had no idea I was actually becoming the gatekeeper to the largest psychiatric facility in the state of Florida, the Miami-Dade County Jail. We have as many beds in our jail serving inmates with mental illnesses as all of Florida's state, civil, and forensic hospital beds combined. On any given day, 56% of our inmates, that's 2,400 inmates, have been diagnosed with a mental health disorder. My county spends $636,000 a day. That's $232 million a year to warehouse 2,400 people with serious mental illnesses. So if your heart is not pulled by the inequities and injustice of what we're doing to this population, your pocketbook should be. My state only spends $47.3 million for 4,000 people in Dade and Monroe counties, when my county is spending $223 million to lock people up. It leaves 70,000 people in my community without access to services. It's no wonder so many people with mental illnesses are ending up in the criminal justice system. And the cost of failing to provide for this population is considerable. We're kind of data geeks in Miami because we understand how important it is to do a good job, because when we apply for your federal grants, we know that we have to show measurement. So we work with a lot of our local universities. And one of our universities is the University of South Florida, which of course is not in South Florida, but I guess that's how they recruit kids to their college. It's more cool to come to South Florida, but they show up and they find out they're in Tampa. What can I tell you? It's Miami, it's Florida. That's how we roll. But they have this great institute, the Florida Mental Health Institute, and they can actually tell a community who the highest utilizers of criminal justice and mental health services are. And so we sent them the names of 3,300 people who had been arrested, who came through our program over a 5-year period, and we said, tell us who the highest users of criminal justice and mental health services are, and they can tell you by zip code. It's really impressive. So they have access to all the arrests in Florida, all the civil commitments in Florida, and all the Medicaid and Medicare records. So we send them these 3,300 names, they crunch all the data, and they narrow it down to 97 people. Primarily men, primarily diagnosed with a schizoaffective or schizophrenia disorder, primarily homeless, and primarily co-occurring. These 97 people over 5 years were arrested 2,200 times. They spent 27,000 days in the Dade County Jail, 13,000 days in a state psychiatric crisis unit. They cost taxpayers tens of millions of dollars, and we got absolutely nothing for it. I guarantee that all of you know your 97 in your community by name. The judges know them, the police officers know them, the probation officers know them, EMT knows them, the emergency knows them. And this one person is cycling in and out of our systems every single day, and nobody has taken responsibility to stop it. Now, we recently updated those numbers just a few weeks ago, and we looked at those same 97 people from 1985. It turns out, since 1985, these same 97 people were arrested 4,210 times and spent 97,438 days in the Dade County Jail and spent tens of millions of more dollars. I wish I could tell you that if this population just got sent to our civil commitment system, everything would be fine. But as it turns out, our civil commitment process is almost as messed up as our criminal justice process. So it's not about fixing the criminal justice system, it's about fixing our community mental health system so that we can keep this population from going in and out of these acute systems every single day. Because the same university that's really not in South Florida but in Tampa did this amazing study, and they looked at all of our civil commitment cases. And what did they find is that every time an individual was civilly committed, there was a 12% increase the person would get arrested. It's the same people going through the civil system that are going through our criminal justice system. And what did they determine? That an involuntary assessment admission is just one more disjointed and uncoordinated intervention in the lives of people who, because of various vulnerabilities, are generally at risk of an arrest. I don't know about you, but in Florida, our civil judges never talk to our criminal judges. There's no coordination between systems. And so the same people that we're dealing in criminal justice, they're dealing in civil. And the merry-go-round just keeps on going, and this poor soul goes in and out every single day, getting worse. So when it comes to the behavioral health crisis system in the United States versus our medical crisis system, what we really have is a tale of two disparate systems. So you call 911 because someone is having chest pains, an ambulance comes out with EMT and trained professionals and medical personnel, and they take you to the hospital and they do surgery on you if need be, and even if you don't have insurance, and then they make sure you have cardiac rehab and you get the greatest services you possibly can get. But God forbid you call because someone in your family is suicidal or psychotic. We send an armed law enforcement officer out, and don't get me wrong, they do an amazing job. But is that really the response that we need or want in this country? And I don't know why we're not angrier about this. Maybe that's why when I got here early this morning, the room was already full, because we are all desperate for answers. And the good news is there are great answers. There is so much research, there's so much data. The federal government has put out amazing reports. The Council of State Government, amazing reports. We know how to fix this. While the United States has 4% of the world's population, we have 25% of the world's inmates. 70% of people in jail today in the United States, 70%, either have a serious mental illness, a substance use disorder, or both. I've started to think maybe we need specialty courts for the 30% that don't. And we need a therapeutic jurisprudence system for the 70% that do. Because while mental health courts sound wonderful, they only take about 0.1% of the people that need it. And in a lot of jurisdictions, they take the wrong 0.1%. They take those low-risk folks. And so we all clap at the end of graduation, but the data shows us they would have been fine without us. So we have to get smarter, we have to get more sophisticated, we have to start to apply the best evidence and the best practices so we get the best outcomes. So mental health in America is like having chest pains and sending someone to a podiatrist. We don't set up what people need. And then when they fail, we blame them when we've never offered them what they actually needed to begin with. And so aside from the enormous human cost of using the criminal justice system as the de facto mental health system, the fiscal impact to government and taxpayers is astronomical, and it provides very few, if any, positive measurable outcomes. In the United States, we spend, and this is hard to believe, over $1 trillion, that's with a T, not a B, $1 trillion a year in direct and indirect incarceration cost. That's a lot of money. Prior to the pandemic, 1 out of every 115 adults were behind bars, and 1 out of every 38 adults were under correctional supervision. Since 1980, the number of people going to jails and prisons has increased by 500%, and lengths of sentences have increased by 166%, which might be fine if we eliminated crime. It didn't really work. And why didn't it work? Because much of these increases are due to untreated mental illnesses and substance use disorders, and you can't criminalize your way out of it. In fact, people with mental illnesses in the United States are 10 times more likely to be incarcerated than hospitalized. They are 19 times more likely to find a bed in the criminal justice system than at any state civil hospital. We have more than 1.5 million people and 2 million incidents with mental illnesses arrested each year, and on any given day, we have about 380,000 people with serious mental illnesses, not just mental illnesses, incarcerated, and another 574,000 under correctional supervision. In the United States, we spend $26 billion directly on jails, another $63 billion on prisons, and billions more on trying to restore competency for people so we can give them credit time served and let them go home. And the situation is particularly shameful because treatment works. Mostly, we have a system problem than a treatment problem. Most of the money we spend related to mental illnesses is wasted on acute treatment care provided in institutional settings such as jails, hospitals, and competency restoration facilities. In fact, most states actually spend more money to incarcerate people with mental illnesses than to treat them. And as the Miami-Dade example illustrates, it is absolutely backwards. Look, people with mental illnesses are no more dangerous than the general population, and on medication, they're actually much less dangerous than the general population, so maybe we should put it in the water like fluoride, but and sadly, they are much, much, much more likely to be victims of violent crimes than perpetrators by a wide, wide, wide margin. Recovery rates for this population, for many of this population, is actually better than heart disease and diabetes. This is not a terminal illness. These are illnesses that are very treatable, but we're not helping people get the kind of access they need to deal with their illnesses. And the great paradox of the pandemic is that we have this great opportunity, and that's why I'm so thrilled to be in Kentucky. I mean, you are at the cutting edge right now to fix this, and it really is inspiring. If you'd indulge me for one moment, I'd like to read from an article on mental health because I think it is incredibly telling. The past few years have seen an increasing amount of interest manifested in mental health and psychiatry. The existing legal procedures treat people with mental illnesses as criminals instead of people who are ill. Booking a person with mental illness at a police department or jail is unnecessary and undesirable. Police officers should be replaced by trained representatives of a hospital to effect the transfer of patients from their homes to the hospital or from one hospital to another. All laws concerning mental health should be integrated to eliminate inefficiency and duplication. In the past, psychiatry has suffered from its isolation from general medicine. Integrating psychiatry into the general practice of medicine is in line with modern trends of medical education and hospital practice. The article goes on and talks about the necessity of community education and how we have to train parents and children and teachers, physicians, judges and jurors, clergy, employers, employees, and the public in general. And these are just a few of the comments and recommendations that were published in the American Journal of Psychiatry in January of 1939. 84 years ago, we knew how to fix this. You know, I've been doing this for 23 years, and it's become quite evident to me that if we treated people with primary health issues the way we treated people with mental illnesses, not only would there be these plethora of civil lawsuits, there would probably be indictments for gross negligence. Why do we tolerate this? Look, the two great horrible ironies in American history is, number one, is we never deinstitutionalized, by the way. What we did is we allowed for the transfer of responsibility from these really horrible state hospitals to these really horrible jails. And we actually made it more difficult for people to recover because now you end up with a criminal record, so it's harder to get housing, it's harder to get employment, you end up hanging around real criminals and learn how to commit real crimes, and so we make their lives more difficult. Maybe the sadder and more cruel irony is that after 200 years, we have begun to use the criminal justice system again as the primary place for people with mental illnesses, because that's what we used to do 200 years ago. And with all the advances that our society has made over the last 200 years, this is the one area in civil rights we have actually gone backwards on. We talked a little bit about competency restoration, and I only have 15 minutes left. I could use 15 hours on that piece. But suffice to say, we have to reform the way we do competency restoration. Just a quick example, Florida, which is really typical of a lot of issues. Florida spends about a third of its entire adult mental health budget to restore competency for about 3,500 people a year. And for those 3,500 people, for 70% of them, three things happen. Charges get dropped, they receive credit for time served or probation, and they leave the courthouse without any access to treatment. It's time to start diverting the nonviolent population into treatment and not into competency so we can shift those dollars over and use them for something that's actually effective. Because frankly, there's something wrong with a society that's willing to spend more money imprisoning people than to treat them. I want to show a quick video that was produced by my local CBS affiliate. And I'll tell you, if you're a person of lived experience, if you don't want to watch this, I could understand. I don't want to traumatize or re-traumatize anybody. It's a pretty rough video. But it was what was going on in our jail before we started our reform.
Now, live, this is CBS 4 News at 11.
Life here is dirty, deplorable, dangerous. Tonight, CBS 4 takes you to a place cameras are rarely allowed to reveal what's happening in our downtown jail to the inmates on the forgotten floor.
The people who spend their days and nights in these jail cells all suffer from mental illness. They're accused criminals, not guilty in the eyes of the law, but forced to live in conditions you cannot imagine.
Our chief investigative reporter, Michelle Gillen, has been given unprecedented television access to reveal what's going on. Michelle joins us now, and I was shocked, to say the least, when I saw this.
I think certainly it is time for the public to see what is going on. The pictures you are about to see are indeed haunting and most disturbing. Hundreds of men with mental illnesses, many crammed into tiny cells. Some arrested for minor crimes that advocates say would have the average person out of jail in just hours. But incredibly, there is no place to send them. Tonight, our cameras take you inside a world rarely exposed, the forgotten floor.
And then they get thrown into a cell.
Prison insiders call this the forgotten floor, but it seems unimaginable that the horrendous, be it horrifying conditions of a jail spilling over with inmates suffering from mental illnesses could be erased from any sane man's mind. As frigid air is pumped into sealed cells, some beg for help for the barest of necessities, water. The faucets are dry. The water's not working.
The water's not working. He's drinking sewer water. He's drinking toilet water out of the toilet.
We'll get you water. It doesn't work, the faucets. The faucets aren't working. These stench-filled cells were designed for one person, outfitted with only a single steel shelf for a bed.
In this one, there's 3 inmates in a cell for one.
Yet 2, 3, sometimes even 5 men diagnosed with mental illnesses, in most cases arrested for low-level felony crimes, in some cases misdemeanors, are locked up for days, weeks, months. Tell me about you. Tell me, living in this, what do you want the public to know tonight?
I want the public to know that people in here, they're urinating on the floor, and we have to sleep on top of it. They're defecating on the floor, and you have to sleep on top of it. There's only one bunk, and it's made of steel.
And how many people are in your cell?
There is 4 in here right now.
They are only allowed out of their cell for 15 minutes 2 times a week.
30 minutes a week they're allowed out.
So other than a half an hour,
That's it.
this is it. They
Right.
are in this room.
Lights are on 24/7. The conditions you see just do not change.
I've been in Vietnam. I've been in Vietnam after 18 months in Vietnam. It's worse conditions in here. I wouldn't put a dog in here.
A chilling perspective from the jail's chief psychiatrist, Dr. Joseph Portier.
You would think that in 2006, we would treat people with chronic mental illness in a much better, more humane manner. But unfortunately, we're reverting back to how it was in the 16 and 1700s, which is terrible. It's morally incomprehensible.
A sentiment echoed by an outraged Miami-Dade County Judge, Steve Leifman.
This is like a secret that people don't know about.
It's a bad secret, and it's a sad secret.
What most of you don't know is that the Miami-Dade jail now serves as the largest psychiatric facility in the state of Florida. 3 of 9 floors, burgeoning with inmates suffering from mental illnesses, and according to Leifman, in desperate need of treatment. Not this type of confinement designed to punish people.
5 times as many people in our jail with mental illness than any psychiatric hospital in Florida. 5 times.
In this, right here.
Right here.
An elderly man emerges from the dirt and darkness.
There's one on the floor underneath the bunk and 1 or 2 standing around waiting for their turn to sleep.
And the crisis has unfolded across the state. In other Florida jails where they strive to comply with all the national standards for housing inmates, frustration over the virtual abandonment of mentally ill inmates left by the state to languish in jail cells for months runs deep. Colonel David Parrish.
Can you imagine the chaos that would result in the local criminal justice system if I stood at the booking door and said, sorry, we don't have any more room, we're not taking them from you, law enforcement?
Parrish from Hillsborough County says local authorities had no choice but to sue the state of Florida to force the Department of Children and Families to comply with their legal mandate to transfer mentally ill inmates to a treatment facility within 15 days.
Jails should not be the de facto mental health facility for a county, but that's what they are in the United States.
You had your birthday here. How old were you?
I was 21.
21, and you've been here 8 months.
In Pinellas County, the weight of incarcerating and caring for mentally ill inmates had everyone paying a price, an unacceptable one, according to Major Kirk Brunner.
We are not a treatment facility, and these people that you saw in Delta 1, the one that plucked his eye out, they need to be in a treatment facility, which is the responsibility of the state, not our responsibility.
And therein lies the danger. William Weaver Sr. was caring for his 40-year-old son Bill at home, a son he says suffered from schizophrenia but functioned well for decades until his medicine was changed. Then one night, according to police records, he attacked his elderly father, who called police and urged them to arrest his son, hoping this would trigger treatment.
Because he was under the false idea that if he got arrested, he'd get treatment.
Bill ended up locked up in a cell on floor 9 of the Miami-Dade pretrial detention center for several months. According to authorities, Bill jumped from this top bunk bed, cracking his skull and breaking his neck. He's now a quadriplegic who needs hospitalization to stay alive. We met up with his father, who had just left his hospital bed.
Do you think anything has come from what the incident of what your son went through?
Nothing. Nothing's changed. Do I think something could change? I don't know. I don't know. It's time. It's time. Something changed. But I don't know if it ever will.
It's a pretty tragic look at the state of mental health, not just in Miami, but in America. And tragically, the young man that jumped off the top bunk passed away as a result of his injuries, and we believe his father passed away shortly thereafter, probably from a broken heart. But things do change. And after we had that situation with the psychiatrist, the best thing about being a judge is when you call a meeting, everybody comes, even if they don't want to be there. And we brought all of our stakeholders together for a 2-day summit, and we mapped out the intersection between the community mental health system and the criminal justice system. And what we found is that we were embarrassingly dysfunctional, not the people that were sick. Us so-called policy-sane, healthy people had designed a system to fail perfectly, and it perfectly failed. And it was expensive. We were spending almost $2 million a year in competency evaluations for misdemeanors in Miami-Dade so that we could release people back to the street, floridly psychotic. And what we decided to do was not to start a mental health court. That was the least of what we needed to do. We needed to restructure our system. And we put together a pre- and post-arrest diversion system. And our pre-arrest, we looked around the country. This is in 2000. The best program out there at the time was the Memphis Crisis Intervention Team Police Program, and it has been amazing. Our officers have become our heroes. We have all 36 of our departments trained, over 8,300 officers trained in Miami-Dade County, and the results have been stunning. Over the last 12 years, and I just got the data last night, we just updated it, our 2 largest departments alone, out of 36, handled 145,302 mental health calls. 94,924 people were diverted to treatment, and they only made 398 arrests. The number of arrests in Dade County as a result of our pre-arrest diversion program went from 118,000 a year to 53,000. We're a large urban community with over 3 million people. We have closed one of our 3 main jails. The CIT program alone in Miami-Dade saved the county 400 years of jail bed days. 400 years. The closing of the jail was not a cost shift, but an actual cost savings. So far, $120 million saved. And boy, does our county like us. And boy, have I gotten money back because of it. The other thing that we realized that we had not anticipated was the high level of trauma and PTSD among our law enforcement officers, something that we had not addressed adequately. The women that run our program get 250 calls a month from our police officers for their own personal mental health issues. So one of the things that we did is we set up a treatment program for law enforcement officers outside their departments because we realized they wouldn't go to their departments for help. Now all of that's expanded. Now we have police peers, and it is helping tremendously. Last year, more officers died from suicide than in the line of duty. They have high suicide rates, they have high domestic violence rates, they have high substance use rates, and they have high divorce rates. And while race certainly can play a role in police shootings, I think PTSD plays a huge role as well, and it's something we need to address. Because we've addressed it, our police shootings have almost stopped in Miami-Dade County. Our data is stunning. We also realized just doing pre-arrest wasn't going to be enough. So we set up a post-arrest diversion system. So that if you get arrested in Miami-Dade on a misdemeanor, for instance, we no longer order a psychological evaluation. I don't care if you're competent on a misdemeanor. What I care about is getting you treated so you don't come back in. And so instead of ordering competency evaluations, we have people assessed at the jail. If they meet criteria for civil commitment within 3 days, we try to get them transferred from the jail to a crisis unit. We let them stay for a couple weeks. We help them get stable. And if they agree to come into our program, which most do, we don't rebook them. We take them directly to court, where our amazing peers meet with them with clothes, with food, with medication, with housing, with transportation. This isn't rocket science. Our recidivism rate among our misdemeanor population went from 75% to 20%. Our state attorney was like, whoa, this is how you really help fight crime. So she allowed us to expand it to nonviolent felony cases. Felony cases, our recidivism rate went from 75% to 6% for those that complete the program, 65% to 70% finish our program. That program alone has saved the county 84 years of jail bed days. We set up an alternative to competency restoration. Now, I have another session. I don't mean to compete. I'm sorry they put us in the same time slot. But if you come to my next session, you will also get to see the next video that we just did of our jail 12 years later, which shows where we are today. And I'll go through all these programs more specifically. But we set up a competency alternative program. So instead of taking people on nonviolent felonies and send them to competency restoration, we put them in a program to help them community reintegrate. What a concept. With all of our great success, we still have about 20 to 30% of the population we have not been able to help. And we haven't been able to help them because none of us have the capacity to serve the most psychotic population. And state hospitalization is not the answer. So I live in an incredible community. And with all the money they save, they are now reinvesting. In a few weeks, we should have our temporary certificate of occupancy this week. And we are opening the first of its kind forensic competency facility. Not competency, forget that. It's the old competency restoration facility that we renovated. The county gave us $53 million, including $8 million from Jackson Memorial. And it's a forensic diversion facility. And it will have all the essential elements for the most acutely ill who keep cycling again and again and again. It's a 181,000 square foot facility, has a receiving facility, crisis stabilization, short-term residential, day activity programs to teach self-sufficiency, culinary supportive employment. It has a courtroom in the building so we can manage criminal and civil cases. It has 200 beds of housing. It has everything we need to help the most acutely ill recover. And so the idea is to take this population, and instead of just kicking them to the curb once we've adjudicated their case, we can gently reintegrate the most acutely ill back into the community with all the supports and services that they need. Look, not one person, not one party, or one institution created this problem. And not one person, one party, or institution is going to fix it. It is going to take the kind of collaboration that you're starting. And what was so exciting to hear today is you're going to go into all your local counties before you leave and figure out how to have a plan, because it's all different in each county. I can't tell you what I did in Miami-Dade is going to work in Louisville. But I do know that the essential elements that we use will work anywhere. And as you get together and as you put together your new plan, I am convinced that we will finally achieve what the Supreme Court wanted us to achieve when deinstitutionalization was ordered, and we're going to achieve the goals that the Conference of Chief Justices and the Conference of State Court Administrators just did by releasing this amazing report that really puts us on a path. And isn't it wonderful to be part of something that's positive, that's going to make a positive change, instead of dealing with all the bitterness that we always are ending up talking about? So congratulations, thank you. You are my inspiration. I appreciate everything.